You know, that new kind of burger, the one made from cells taken from the skin of cows. Yeah, seems like the science teams and research labs finally created a way of making food from basically nothing. And you'd think that would be a great thing, but I'm not so sure. This isn't the first time a project like this has sprung up. You're probably thinking I'm screwing with you now, but I'm serious. It's happened before. You've probably never heard of this. And like all things, there is a reason for this never being told. A rather disturbing reason. Way back in the Second World War, the Russian government realized they were struggling to feed their people. Children were sick. People were diseased and malnourished. Many even tried to protest, but as history tells us, they were quickly silenced. Of course, the government needed a solution that didn't involve murdering all that spoke out and fast. An unhappy populace leads to riots, violence, and destruction after all. So they commissioned a small team of scientists to create something. No real idea was given. So the science team was given free rein to do whatever they chose. Cinnamon fine Russian cuisine. In the end, they came up with a monstrous idea. You know how cancer cells multiply and multiply within the body? Well, those Russian scientists thought they could use this sort of growth found in tumors and other such awful diseases and afflictions as meat products. Now, if tumor burgers sound bad enough, it gets far worse from here. They created a sort of serum, made tumors spring up on animals like bubbles on a boiling pot of water. They needed something they could grow the cells on. Animals were out of the question as they were needed to produce more and more food. So the first thing they asked the higher-ups is not a lab or a grant or something like that. They asked for permission to use prisoners of war as freaking guinea pigs. So they tried it out. They get results, and then in the blink of an eye, only a few weeks into development, something catastrophic breaks the whole thing down. Now, you're probably wondering how the hell I know this grotesque stuff. I'll tell you. I've been to the labs. When I learned from an anonymous source that this insanity was going down, I just had to find out where they did it. And sure enough, after months of searching around the Russian wilderness, I finally get a lead in this Russian town called Limsk. I talked about Russian cuisine there. And with the second guy, I get a genuine response. It wasn't a good one. The guy spat at my feet and told me to screw off and die. But it was still an indication that the labs were known around town. I asked around and I get weird looks, shrugs, or scowls until I meet another guy. Vasily looked like he was in his late 80s and had a face looked like it had been kicked by the hind legs of a horse. Had a sort of limp to go along with it, but the man was a gold mine when it came to the project. He gave me the exact location, the way to get in, and even how long it would take to get there. And I was surprised to say the least. I asked him why he was giving me all this information, and he simply responds, "There's something you must see," in a throaty Russian accent. "What is it?" I replied tentatively, a little nervous now with his cryptic message making me rather anxious. "You'll see." And with that, he hobbled off. Now, at this point, I had a choice. Now, of course, curiosity won in that round. So I gathered up some supplies, a flashlight, some water, a map of the wilderness, stuff like that, and a rucksack, and I drove off. Worker quarters 1 through 10, scientist quarters 1 through 5, and warden's quarters. I checked a few of the workers' quarters. Nothing but dusty old beds and empty drawers. The scientist wards provided some more interesting results. 1 to 2 were empty, but 3 had a little tape player and 7 different tapes. I took them up and started listening to them as I looked along the winding passages. The speaker had a very familiar voice. Couldn't put my finger on what, but I knew I had heard it before. The throatiness, the depth, and pitch, it all seemed eerily familiar. Day 1 of Project Russian Cuisine. The test subject named Norman was infected with the serum to produce cancerous cells. Slight discomfort, but no tumors grown. I'm still utterly ashamed at my colleagues' ideas to eat tumors, but at this time, it's better than any idea we've come up with. It's either that or we starve. RTM tells me the workers don't know what they're working towards, which is probably for the best. After checking the other quarters, I finally headed into the warden's room. It looked like all the others. Dusty bed, open drawers, but there were 2 things that caught my eye. One was a little key card with a label saying cells attached to it, and the other was a note scrolled in Russian. Knowing a little Russian myself, I attempted to translate it. What I found made me nervous, to say the least. If you're reading this, run. The building has a curse you can't even hope to comprehend. The things I and the other men did will forever haunt these halls, and no priest will ever cleanse this place. Growths. Those satanic growths. The end of that passage in particular made every synapse in my being simultaneously scream in one voice, run. But my curiosity again caught hold of me like a choke chain. I rationalized again that this place was very, very abandoned, but at the same time there was something very off about it. I put in another tape and the familiar voice played. Day 2. Growths have finally sprouted on the liver and intestine. We have to give a high dose of morphine to Norman, as the screaming was scaring the other scientists working. Norman is now holding and presumably will die in the next few weeks. Everything again was untouched by time, which was when I noticed an eerie hum coming from the kitchen. I wondered, was electricity being supplied to this place? And if so, why? What reason would the Russians have to supply this place with electricity? I headed into the kitchen and found the hum was coming from the refrigerator. And quicker, my anxiety levels through the roof, and I flung the door open. Flesh, rows upon rows of meaty, gross flesh. I nearly threw up, just barely reaching my mouth and covering it. The smell was unmistakable, like someone cut open a swine and left the insides to rot for a while. I immediately shut the door and tried to catch my breath in the murky darkness. I decided to listen to another tape to try and calm my nerves, but it only made things worse. Day 3. We fed the meat to a couple of the men. They seemed to enjoy the burgers, though they did notice the so-called odd taste. Apparently like lamb, maybe even a bit of liver. We decided to feed more people the meat, though I, like many others in the project, are still skeptical of the health aspects from eating this ghastly concoction. I was still hyperventilating after seeing the products of the experiment, but I pressed onto the labs, and this is when things got even more gut-wrenchingly gruesome. There was crusted dark blood on the little lab tables, more of the gross meat carelessly spoiled, hacksaws, everything you might imagine in some kind of stereotypical horror flick. And again, the smell was unbearable. The sights made me want to spew, but the room saved the worst for last at the back. A little door with testing on a little sign attached to it. A gut feeling told me that this was going to be bad. I played another tape. Day 4. Our new subject tried to break free. A couple days of growing had completely warped his mind and physical appearance, which led him to try and attack some of the workers and myself. The bastard bit me. He nearly broke out. So, in the end, we had to put him down. Describing in words what he looked like by the end of the endeavor would be like trying to describe an orphanage catching fire. So, I will spare the details. One thing is for sure, I don't want to work here anymore. The things we've created need to be stopped, but here I am, trapped. I need help. So I was back at that moment. My heart started racing. My whole body was shaking in terror. I knew this was going to be bad, and I knew whatever was waiting on the other side would even be worse than the cafeteria. I swung the door open, expecting the worst. And what I got was a small room, a glass window, and another room holding a chair. Nothing serious. I looked inside a little more and suddenly saw a black mass sitting on top of the chair. Immediately, I crouched down, fears spreading through my body. Something was in there. The mass wasn't moving, so I thought that whatever it was either dead or asleep. I wanted to see what it was. I needed to know. Vastly, a cryptic message started to make sense as my curiosity had been fueling my decisions every step of my exploration. I needed to see this as I started to feel like I was being guided by some otherworldly force. Or at least that's how I rationalized it. But looking back, I must have been insane to not run away after I opened the fridge. But who knows? Anyway, I crept up quietly to check if it was breathing, and sure enough, not a sound. I relaxed a little and played another tape. The scientist now sounding a lot less healthy than the tape before, stopping to cough mid-sentence. It sounded like he had gotten ill with something. And sure enough, day 5, I've been infected. The things spread after you touch them. I can't believe I didn't realize the workers that have eaten the meat have been ill with God knows what. It finally makes sense about what's wrong with them. My face still feels numb from the surgery, and things are worse off than ever. The tumors have been spreading among the workers. You can't let even one of these disease mongers escape into the world. Good luck. After I'd fully recovered after the assault, I headed for the final part of the complex cells. I stood in front of the steel door, and through the door I could hear noises, growls, choking, spluttering. I could even guess a few tumor farms were on the other side. Nothing I couldn't handle after dealing with the first. But throwing caution to the wind, I took out the key card, slid it through the locking mechanism, and I opened the door. Bodies all huddled together, packing the room in its entirety, all deformed, all with pulsating, overgrown limbs, rocky teeth, red-blooded gums, and dead black eyes. And they were all looking at me. I ran. I dropped everything and ran as fast as possible to the light at the other end. A horde of the abominations hot on my trail, screaming, gnawing, biting, and swiping at everything they could. If I stopped even for a second, I would be ripped apart. Sweat was practically pouring out of me as I reached the end and quickly pressed the button to shut the gate. They were still running. The gate wasn't shutting fast enough, and oh god, every one of them was trying to get out. And then thump, the gate slammed shut. I could still hear their screeches and scratches against the metal gate. Now, I don't know what happened after that. I must have blacked out. And when I came to, I was in my car, bloodied and beaten. The hotel owner gave me a hell of a funny look when I came back to wash the blood and bile all off me. And I've not seen Basley since the first time I saw him. My head feels heavy and I feel weak. I'm probably going to have to off myself, make sure the disease doesn't spread.